Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be digging into the really interesting world of gray hat hacking.
Hmm.
Now, most people probably heard of black hats, you know, the cyber criminals who are just out for profit,
Right, the bad guys,
and white hats, the ethical security folks, the ones working strictly by the book.
the good guys, typically working for companies or finding bugs legally.
Exactly. But gray hats, they're somewhere in between, operating without explicit permission, kind of in that legal gray zone.
But often with, let's say, good intentions,
Yeah.
right? They're not usually motivated by money like black hats are.
Yeah, their goal is often just uncovering vulnerabilities, though they don't always follow the letter of the law like white hats.
And that's what makes it so fascinating, that tension. They're
Yeah.
making a call, maybe bypassing authorization, but the why can be about wanting to see things fixed.
They spot a weakness, and instead of, I don't know, just sending an email.
They might decide to demonstrate it,
Yeah.
actively show the problem exists.
Mm-hmm. Right. And to really get a handle on this, we've actually pulled together 100 different examples of gray hat actions.
100. Wow, okay. That's comprehensive.
Yeah, the idea is to explore the whole spectrum.
Yeah.
From things that almost feel like a public service
Huh?
to things that definitely push boundaries, maybe get into more controversial territory.
Exactly. We're not really here to cast judgment, just to understand the complexity of it all. You'll hear about flaws found in, well, everything from election infrastructure to the apps you use every day.
It's a real look under the hood, isn't it?
It really is.
And for you listening, whether you're super technical or just, curious about how this digital world actually works,
Yeah.
this is going to be valuable. These aren't just abstract ideas. They show real weaknesses in systems that affect all of us.
Mm.
Understanding that gray hat view can, well, sharpen our own perspective on security.
And maybe give some insight into what we can actually do about it, individually or maybe within our organizations.
That's it. Okay, so let's dive into the first batch of examples. These are mostly focused on how gray hats bring public vulnerabilities out into the open.
Right. Let's start with that voting machine case.
Ah, yeah. The one where a hacker found weak encryption,
And just tweeted about it. Straight to the public.
which immediately flags that kind of double-edged sword, doesn't it?
It really does. On one hand, great awareness. On the other hand, putting it out there without coordinating, well, you risk panic.
Or worse, you give actual malicious actors a heads up before there's a fix.
Exactly. The timing and method are tricky.
Absolutely. But what's interesting is the kind of fix that gets talked about afterwards. Things like a national bug bounty program for election tech.
And much stronger encryption in the firmware, with third-party audits.
Yeah, things that make you think, why isn't this standard practice already?
Well, implementing something like a national bug bounty for voting systems is complex.
Yeah,
Defining the scope, handling the reports responsibly, it's a big undertaking.
sure. But the core idea, incentivizing people to find flaws, that seems solid.
Agreed. Okay, next up, we had that government website with weak HTTPS,
Right, the Secure Connection Protocol. A hacker demonstrated the flaw.
which, again, raises the stakes. Messing with government systems, even if you mean well.
That can bring serious legal trouble down on the individual. Big time.
Absolutely critical point. But look at the suggested solution again. Mandate TLS 1.3. That's the latest, most secure version.
For all government sites.
Yes. And run regular automated checks on their security certificates. It points to, well, fundamental upgrades needed for public trust online.
Okay, moving to something maybe a bit more relatable for many listeners. The university portal.
Ah, the login bypass using cookie manipulation?
It sounds almost too simple for a university system, right?
Often the vulnerabilities are surprisingly simple. Oversights in design, maybe configuration.
So what were the fixes there?
Things like using secure authentication tokens, much harder to fake digital keys, essentially. And strict session timeout policies. So you don't stay logged in forever. Basic security hygiene, but if missed.
Use an easy way in. Wow. Okay, next. A retail app. This one was leaking unencrypted customer data through its API.
Yeah, the way the app talks to the server. And unencrypted customer data. In this day and age, that's just
A disaster waiting to happen, a huge breach of trust.
totally. Sending sensitive data in the clear. It's a fundamental miss.
So the fixes are obvious, right? Use HTTPS.
Always encrypt data in transit. Use tokenization too, swapping real data for placeholders.
And secure those APIs properly, test rigorously for data leaks. Sounds like application security 101.
It really is. Or should be.
Then we had that hospital scenario. A gray hat showed a man-in-the-middle vulnerability on the Wi-Fi.
Oof. in a hospital
Ah.
with patient data potentially flying around. That's deeply concerning.
Yeah, the consequences could be severe.
Absolutely. A successful attack there means intercepting, maybe even changing communications.
Yeah.
Imagine.
So the security measures are critical, encrypting internal traffic.
Definitely. Segmenting the Wi-Fi, keeping patient systems separate from, say, guest access.
And maybe just disabling wide open, unencrypted networks altogether.
Probably a good idea in that environment. Essential for patient privacy and system integrity.
Okay, another pretty common one. Finding open AWS S3 buckets.
Ah, yes. Cloud storage containers lift wide open to the internet, often full of sensitive documents.
Seems like a recurring headache.
It is, but often quite avoidable with just, proper setup. AWS gives you the tools.
It's about using them correctly.
Exactly. Strong IAM policies defining who gets access to what, restricting public access by default.
And running regular scans. Tools like S3 and Cybersecurity.
Yeah. Automated checks to catch misconfigurations. It often boils down to basic cloud security awareness.
Then there was the router example. Hacker finds an unsecured one.
And instead of doing harm, just puts up a secure me warning page.
Kind of a digital nudge. Polite, almost.
It perfectly shows that non-malicious intent you sometimes see. And the fixes are things everyone with a router should probably do.
Like updating the firmware.
Yes, regularly. Change the default password. They're often online.
And close ports you're not using. Basic home network security.
Then the webcams. Finding unsecured IP camera feeds online using special search engines.
That's pretty creepy. The Gray Hat blogged about it to raise awareness.
Yeah, really drives home the privacy risk of all these connected devices, if they're not secured.
You could be broadcasting your living room.
Exactly. The suggested fix makes sense. Mandatory passwords out of the box.
And making sure firmware updates are actually pushed out and easy to apply needs to be standard.
Okay, what about the airline API? Where you manipulating the web address, the endpoint?
Allowed access to change ticket info? Yeah, that seems incredibly risky. Could cause chaos for travelers.
For sure. Minor mess-ups, major disruptions, maybe even grabbing personal data.
So the fixes are about locking down that API.
Pretty much. Rigorous input validation, checking the data sent to the API, using proper user authentication tokens.
And maybe restricting sensitive stuff like ticket changes to a secure dashboard, not just through the API directly.
Exactly. Prevent that kind of unauthorized access and fiddling.
Right. Number 10 in this first run-through, the FinTech App API. Accessing user profiles without logging in.
Ouch. For a financial app, that's about as critical as it gets.
You'd expect Fort Knox level security there.
You should. Things like implementing OAuth 2 for authorization, using API gateways to throttle requests, stop brute force stuff.
And zero trust checks.
Yeah, basically verify every request always. Don't trust anything implicitly. It really highlights again how vital secure development is from the start, especially with money involved.
Okay, moving on. We saw a case where someone just scanned a university network.
And found vulnerable open ports, like unlocked doors on their servers.
A pretty basic reconnaissance step for an attacker.
Exactly. Those open ports are potential ways in. So the solutions are also fundamental network security.
Like detecting scans.
Yeah, having systems spot that kind of activity, closing ports that aren't needed.
And doing regular internal scans yourself to find the weaknesses before someone else does.
Proactive defense. Standard practice, really.
Next, faking GPS in a ride-sharing app. You said that was surprisingly easy.
The example suggested it was, yeah, which could obviously be used for fraud.
Drivers faking routes for bigger fares.
Or maybe even something more dangerous for passengers. The fixes involve checking things on the server side.
Where it's harder to tamper with the data.
Right. Validate the route there. And use anti-spoofing methods on the phone. Combine GPS with other sensors, like the accelerometer. Makes it harder to fool.
Then we have the IoT light bulbs. That one was almost cute.
Making them blink red to signal a flaw. Yeah, a very Gray Hat move. Non-disruptive alert.
A digital tap on the shoulder for the owner and the company.
Exactly. And it highlights security for all these smart home gadgets. Needs encrypted updates. OTA, over the air.
So hackers can't install bad firmware.
Precisely. And secure authentication for the APIs controlling them. Increasingly important as everything gets connected.
We also touched on paywall bypasses. Using browser tricks to get subscriber content.
An ongoing battle. It really shows the limits of trying to enforce security just on the user's computer, the client side.
Because the user ultimately controls that.
Right, so the real fix has to be server side, validating the user session there.
And maybe using tricks like code obfuscation or token checks to make the client-side bypass harder.
Yeah, layers of defense. protect that content in the business model.
Okay, next, the news site JavaScript injection. A small text change, but still.
Still an injection vulnerability. It shows even minor flaws can be leveraged. Disclose responsibly in this case, thankfully.
The fix being
Sanitize all user input religiously. Stop malicious code getting in, and use a content security policy CSP.
to tell the browser exactly what scripts and resources are okay to load.
Exactly. Prevents a whole class of attacks, from tiny text swaps to much worse things.
Then the recurring problem of finding live API keys.
In public GitHub repositories.
Yeah.
Yeah, developers accidentally committing secrets happens all the time.
A simple mistake with potentially huge consequences.
Massive risk. Luckily, there are tools now. GitHub has secret scanning built in.
Catches them automatically.
Tries to. And developers can use pre-commit hooks, little checks that run before they commit code, blocking sensitive data. Essential stuff.
We also had the subdomain takeover. Someone hosting a Secure Me banner on an old university subdomain.
Right, just highlights the need to track your digital footprint. Those abandoned assets are easy targets.
So keep an eye on your DNS records.
Definitely. And clean up, remove subdomains you're not using anymore, reduce that attack surface.
Nearly there for this section, the hotel chain admin panel, just open on the internet.
Yikes. Leaving the keys to the kingdom right out there. Admin panels should never be public-facing like that.
Seems obvious.
You'd think. Restrict access by IP address, only allow logins from trusted office networks, for example.
And use multi-factor authentication, 2FA.
Absolutely. Mandatory for internal portals, especially admin ones. Basic security layers.
Okay, and the last one for this batch. The race condition in the trading app.
Triggering multiple trades with one token. That's bad.
Very direct financial implications there. Could drain accounts fast.
It really underscores why secure coding is paramount in finance apps. The fixes involve things like locking user sessions during critical stuff,
So you can't do two things at once accidentally.
or maliciously, and using atomic database transactions, making sure a whole series of steps either completes entirely or fails entirely. No half-done transactions.
Prevents those kinds of exploits that lead straight to financial loss.
Phew. Okay, that was the first 20.
Yeah, and even just in that set, you really see the huge range of activities under this gray hat label, right?
Absolutely. From simple configuration errors, they point out, to quite complex software flaws.
And maybe unintentionally, they provide some really valuable security lessons by shining a light, sometimes uncomfortably, on these weak spots.
They really do. It's a constant reminder, isn't it, of the need for vigilance, for getting the fundamentals right in security across everything we build and use online.
So, as you've been listening to these examples, unauthorized access, but often aiming to show a weakness, it raises a pretty interesting question, I think, for you listening. Where do you draw the line between, say, ethical curiosity, wanting to see how things work, and actions that could actually cause harm, even if unintended?
That's the core dilemma, isn't it? It's not always black and white, intent versus impact.
Definitely something to think about as we all live more of our lives online.
Indeed. And this whole landscape, cybersecurity, ethical hacking, responsible disclosure, the role of gray hats, it's constantly changing.
Always evolving.
So we definitely encourage you to keep exploring these ideas. They have real significant implications for, well, pretty much everyone today.